So if we're actually thinking about perspectives on Asian cities from a literature and world cities as opposed to particular artworks and art districts, I want to introduce this Nylon Kong as one of these contemporary pieces of discourse that's circulating in the creative studies arena just recently in the past few months. This is an issue, obviously, of time, and earlier this year, in which I think the way to analyze this is you've got business writers taking a look at what's going on in the Asian economy and replacing Tokyo with Hong Kong. So that in the way that Saskia Sassen set up the three global cities, London, New York, Hong Kong, that this is, gets already picked up by some of the creative city leaders that are active in the U.S. Suggestion. This is all documented by performance artist herself. And this is to say something about, well, how much activity is going on in the city, what's going on. Like in the years of political and local sustained activity through the early 2000s. Some order here. Richard Florida, who's the most well-known so-called arbiter of the creative class in the U.S., has already picked up this Nylon Kong in his blog on creative class. And all I want to do here is show a set of images from actually primary documents. The contemporary world economy that is spinning out through the world city has in its policy arena a set of prescriptive positions on how to grow the economy in predominantly services industries. And the category of this that's most popular now, so Hong Kong's own Center for Cultural Policy Research, quasi-independent think tank, at the University of Hong Kong has been publishing these kinds of reports. You can find this sort of information turned into news, represented in policy, and repeated as if so much truth by different arenas of business community. Or Shanghai, which has a creative industry policy, creative industry center. This kind of positioning is really at stake, especially in the past few years. But if you look at the language of what's being discussed, it's not so much about culture. It's about renaming services sector industry, and it's about the knowledge-based economy. It's about digital products. It's about all kinds of media, and occasionally it's about art. And so this is what I wanted to suggest, that there's this kind of uneasy relationship between art and a cultural sector that's being defined through the economy. So that certainly there are many scholars and thinkers making critiques of these kinds of positions already. And this is one that's reasonably interesting. And so certainly pulling back to look at the critique of Adorno and Horkheimer, who looked at the hit culture of LA when they were living here, actually, in the first half of the 20th century. And it's, it's not so much, the critique of creative industries is not so much a repeat of that, but a way of seeing how in the contemporary neoliberal economic arena, the creative industry positioning is one that creates these arenas of promoting unique cultural content for appropriation by industries that would then mass produce it. And so it really does value the creative individual, the person who would be entrepreneurial and unique and different. And so on the one hand, this is kind of what gets valorized in so many cities as hip, chic kind of cultural positions, while at the same time, the critique of the creative industry's position is this is highly useful for the contemporary neoliberal economy that wants individuals to be entrepreneurial, to not need state services, to not want to have to work in contexts that lack, you know, this kind of cultural spark and innovative outlook. And so you can see some of the language here in this. And so I wanted to come down and bring it down to Hong Kong. And so here from Hong Kong TDC, just some reporting on Hong Kong representation in Shenzhen at a cultural industries fair. And I just want to highlight a couple of things. And at the very bottom, that there should be also an enhanced partnership between Shenzhen and Hong Kong to maintain competitiveness in the international arena and build a metropolis together. So then in the second part of this news item, you can see that in this creative industries activity for Hong Kong and the Shenzhen meeting, that number 4 is arts and culture. And how does that get represented through the creative industries policy is through, as Yan Qi and I think a couple other people mentioned earlier today, the West Kowloon Cultural District project. And so these are state positions and economic positions coming together in contemporary political economy, normative political economy that would seek to find economic growth in continued urbanization and its associated industrialization and economic development. And so that already Hong Kong's think tank, the Balkinia Foundation, has come out with the Hong Kong Shenzhen Metropolis Report. You can find this perspective at stake in various arenas. This was a sign at the border crossing. You can see it, the Shenzhen, the Shangang, right? The 10 years of relations between Shenzhen and Hong Kong. It's like cross-border fusion, right? So, you know, the representations of this are not just in reports, and they're all around you if you care to look for them. If you go into the Luohu station of the Shenzhen subway, as soon as you go across, there's this mural around the curved wall on it's not the concourse, it's what level is it? It's in there. Anyway, it's obviously Hong Kong and Shenzhen with no new territories between them, right? It's all merged into one city, and there it is, and it's been there for several years. So then I think also Yan Qi mentioned this morning, in this world of art biennials, which has, of course, become very interesting rapidly in Asia and elsewhere, but there are so many in Asia now, from Sydney up to Yokohama, and they're right in this season right now. This is not one of them, but it's certainly in that genre of biennial madness almost, if you will. And this is the architecture one that occurred last year. And I've written in the white lettering down at the bottom the biennial theme, City of Exploration and Regeneration. Who's expiring and what's regenerating? This is a project, a big mapping project in the exhibit, Thoughts from the Underground, and looks normal enough from a distance until you start checking out the place names. I think most of you know where you are in looking at this, but the sort of focus there with the white and then the yellow, that's the new territory Shenzhen border. But all the place names in Shenzhen are Hong Kong, right? And then here we have focus on the harbor, Hong Kong Island here at the bottom, Kowloon side up there, and all of the buildings that are put into Hong Kong central district are from Shenzhen. And the one that I circled in red in this work, right, is certainly the Shenzhen Civic Center. And so this cross-border fusion perspective is coming up in diverse arenas, and certainly in this creative industries arena, which is everywhere in these world cities. So I put this back up here to suggest where we might go next, the West Kowloon Cultural District. And this is a project, you know, not just to describe it, to try to analyze it really quickly, to say why has it been important in the city and region in the past years. I think actually Matthew Turner put his finger on it early in a publication, saying, you know, this had to be, to paraphrase you, please, you know, add in here, a great world-class cultural tourism facility to generate economic returns in the service economy and substantially through tourism. And it's going to compete with the one in Singapore, going to compete with these other mega projects all over Asia. A $60 billion Hong Kong project. This is big. This is very big. And this is the first project that Hong Kong, in terms of infrastructure, a city that may build infrastructure as well or better than anywhere in the world, it was not able to achieve in the first round of planning. Was very unusual. It was tabled and canceled for a while for a period of reconsideration. But what we've got going on here is actually the exhibition for this project that was set out in a couple places around the city in order to get the people on board with it, because there was enormous hue and cry and enormous protest against this. And this is what you start to see in this first decade in Hong Kong after '97, is this outpouring in the cultural arena. On the one hand, the promotion of culture as creative industries by the state and the economy. On the other hand, the rise of artists, arts programs, art education, and then the movement toward democracy and people rising up in diverse groups and different times, especially July 1st, coming together to have comments on all these kind of projects. And this project was not popular. And you can even see it in people's faces. They're not looking happy about this project. And there was a lot of debate. Many people here know a lot more about this than I do. There was a lot of debate about this. And it was canceled to be tabled and reassessed for a while. And certainly Norman Foster's swooping canopy roof didn't even save it. This is the plan. I thought, when you're in the field of architecture, you have to marshal discourse really well, right? You have to be able to say your project is, like that one cool house and times something in Shenzhen. It's got to be some great thing. I thought this looked like a disposable razor. What was intended. Pauline Lam thought it was problematic too, and so. Right, to eat lemon, right, in Cantonese, right, to eat lemon is like to reject something, right, eat a lemon, go away. And so even in, of course, various projects and installations, this was a focus of critique. But you see, the property development issue at stake here couldn't be bigger. This is the last big reclamation, with the exception of the one going on right now by Star Ferry. But this is the really last big one on Kowloon side, likely. And it's unbuilt to this very day, even as the next high-rise of the city is under construction adjacent to it. So this is what it's all about. It's about this property development. It's what West Kowloon is all about. And what is under that circle of buildings, well, I'll go back for a second. Under that circle of buildings is Kowloon Station, the biggest station in the MTR system by size. Residential towers, the ICC tower there going up. And really what is going to be the new transportation hub for the express train to Guangzhou. So this is the link for the Shenzhen Hong Kong metropolis. And it's all in the creative industries discourse. So Oil Street, extraordinarily enough, okay, as many people know, was really the hot spot for artists, some architects, designers getting together, 1A space, Choi Yan-Chi's alternative art space, had its origins here, artist commune, some other important local arts organizations, videotage, etc. And this area got going, had a lot of activity even before 798 in Beijing. But of course, in this property development regime, government did not allow it to continue. It was short-lived, and maybe there's some regret now. But when I think of Choi Yan-Chi's works, and this one, you know, I took this photo at the Parasite exhibit on your 30 years retrospective, but this Humanize Hong Kong is part of what these local movements that are integrated with the alternative arts community are about, to respond to these kinds of issues and the apparent prioritization in the government planning, but which starts to look a lot more like property development as usual, while art as artists here can tell us. So Oil Street was really the predecessor to this, but in the city that we think of sometimes as less constrained in terms of some of these entrepreneurial possibilities, not in the arena of arts, and especially alternative arts. But out of the Oil Street transformation and the movement over to Cattle Depot, Oil Street was in North Point and the island, moving over to Cattle Depot and Kowloon, a lot of people got ideas about studio art space. And there's probably, there are not too many places in the world where a property development ideology is so fundamentally overwhelming of state and society. Hong Kong is outstanding this way, and to the degree that it's not easy to describe in short shrift. But for example, Europeans and North Americans, I think, tend to think of the deindustrialization of the mid-20th century landscape, leaving vacant buildings in cities that artists can just go out and colonize. And this just doesn't even exist in this part of the world. It doesn't exist in Hong Kong. But there was, as a sort of long moment, at the 97-99 financial downturn, and as the manufacturing industry started to restructure and the lower wage opportunities emerged across the border, that there were some lower cost flatted factories in the industrial estates out, this is Taiwan, out at the end of the island line in Foshan and Kuntong. And so you start getting a bit of art studio clustering out in these areas, but very little support at the city center in places like West Kowloon, where the state is still trying to insert these mega property development projects, but now in the new terms of culture and cultural industry. This is actually Tozer Pak's studio in Foshan, and I wanted to show it to just give a sense of the limitations on space, which are serious and real in this city. And so you don't see the big campuses like you see in China. You don't see the big spaces like you see in Shanghai, and that's why Assange is so unusual. There's a graffiti artist group called START, and through the graffiti you can sort of barely make out that the statement that in its space restrictions, the average Hong Kong flat is 450 square feet, and in that context, the context of working in that kind of environment, they did an exhibit in which there were 450 square foot canvases, to spotlight this issue. That in this kind of context, making space for art is a seriously critical issue. And so this one is the latest experiment on the part of government and artists and cultural workers to come together to try to find a solution. This is the Jockey Club Creative Arts Center, so it's obviously got funding from the largest philanthropic organization in the city. And this is in the Shek Kip Mei area, one of the oldest government housing districts in the city, which is now undergoing redevelopment. This is a flatted factory. And artists were invited to apply for space here where the rents will be maintained as relatively low. And certainly the rent issue is one of the huge issues, the city of extraordinarily volatile rents. But, the Jockey Club Creative Arts Center also has all of the discourse of creative industries, a little bit lighter than the government and economic perspective, but still very much embedded in this project as well. And so on the one hand, it can be in a serious policy arena. On another hand, perhaps here we'd like to see it as more discursive than actual policy, because there are artist projects here at stake. Just to finish up then, what I'd like to do is bring the issues back down to the ground in an even more local way, to raise the perspective of the action movements around the demolition of the Star Ferry Clock Tower and the Star Ferry Piers on Central and then Queens Pier. I guess the way to contextualize these is that they're really the most significant protests in the city since the 1960s. And so in this context, you have various, here Joel and Spung's work commemorating these local sites. And at the same time, really artists coming together with different kinds of cultural workers, students, preservationists, some government workers, some actors coming down to support the cause. But all these perspectives, like relations between Hong Kong and Beijing, what's happening to our local places and environment. So I think that we can suggest, like here's some of Wen Yao's work in her voice writer series. What happens if you read Hong Kong's basic law into a voice writer? You get something that comes out, triangular iron select prosthesis idiotic eval, right? And so all sorts of people commenting on the situation as Hong Kong goes through this period, now into the second decade of SAR experience. And so I think part of what we're seeing here is a different set of issues than when Akbar Abbas wrote, Culture and the Politics of Disappearance. I think the issues have shifted. I'm not saying I know exactly what they are, but they've shifted, and partly because there are these movements rising up around various local issues, and a lot of them are place-based and associated with beloved sites of historic experience that people want maintained in the city. And so the city that hurtled into urbanization and the hyper-modern built environment is now pausing to say, we'd like to value the old while building the new, but I think it runs deeper than that, because these are places associated with Hong Kong identity in the built environment. So this is the Hong Kong side of the Shenzhen Hong Kong Architecture Biennial. And here you have the IFC and the ICC, and here you've got the Queens Pier characters stamped over, and there, of course, the Star Ferry Clock Tower, because certainly people are seeing in these issues and representing them in their works the tensions between the state-capital alliance that continues to develop this city and local perspectives which are very strongly felt and now expressed, and really that dialogue between the two perspectives not sufficiently taking place. So here, in conclusion, this is once again going back to that Kowloon Station site. The podium level is this big residential office development called Union Square. This is the analogy being placed on this is like the Docklands in London, the redevelopment of London in the Docklands. And so one artwork here commenting on the arch, right? And another one here. This is one of the graffiti artists. And so this is just the conclusion. I think you are seeing in this city, as well as many others, a kind of income polarization that is resulting in a kind of have and have-not situation that people are really recognizing. A lot of local people are really recognizing in these social movements as they rise in response to particular issues. And then at the same time, the representations of the issues by government and normative policy are that through these creative industries we grow our economy and our cities become ever better, wonderful arenas of urban lifestyle, choice and luxury. This slide is actually from Shanghai. This is right across from Xintiandi in Shanghai. And this is the kind of extreme polarization that I think is everywhere apparent should you start to look for it. Okay, let me stop here. Actually, we've asked Angelina and Matthew to make a few comments on these two sort of place-based presentations.